Hi everyone, it's Connor DC and I am back again on my live stream. It's Friday, it's 3 p.m. As usual, I'm going to bring hopefully an hour's worth of content for you. It's just started raining as I've just started my stream. But yeah, I'm going to hopefully bring about an hour's worth of content for you, and it's going to be something a little bit different. So this week we kind of realised that we overlooked a something probably most important when it comes to designing and creating apps in Power Apps, and that is the actual design of the Power Apps. So we're going to start looking at, or I have been started looking at over the last week, at prototyping, wireframing, and designing the Power Apps. And this is going to be kind of pushing away from Power Apps itself and more focusing on the actual kind of theory behind it, as well as building it. So I've actually prepared a little presentation, which is the first presentation I've done on my live streams. So I'm just going to bring that up at the moment. Just bear me a second. So yeah, what are we going to be looking at today? So it's going to be prototyping, wireframing, and designing your Power Apps. So where should we get started with this? So the first thing that we need to consider before we even get into any prototyping or even jumping into Power Apps further down the line is our user interface and user experience. There's different approaches to building an app. You can start with the functionality. You can start with kind of building your databases first. But from my personal choice, my personal perspective, I kind of like the whole design aspect of it, and then building your data sources and the functionality around the actual design of the app. And this is where prototyping comes into play really well. So when we talk about user interface and user experience, what do we mean? So in terms of the user interface, we need to think about a couple of things, and that's going to be thinking about our layout. And when we're creating apps, we know that in Power Apps we can create them as like the mobile experience, the tablet experience, and they can also be displayed on a desktop using the actual studio. They can be displayed in Teams. So we've got to think about the kind of layout of our application. Like, where do we want things to appear on the app? Like, what are we trying to deliver with the app? We also need to make sure that we are using various elements, but also keeping them simple and descriptive. Now that's kind of counterintuitive. What do I mean by this? So I noticed after building my prototype, which we're going to get onto a little bit later, that there was a few things that kind of popped up, and I realized that a lot of my the user interface was very kind of texty. And I know it's an article-based news app that we're building, if you've been following on for the last couple of weeks, but I've realized that having things too texty it just makes things look a little bit cluttered. So that's where we can start using just completely removing text altogether and using images and icons to replace those elements. Again, we're gonna look at that a little bit later when I show you the prototype. And that goes on to basically making sure that we're using the correct icons that we want to use. For instance, there's multiple ways of saying yes and no in an icon or an image, like positive and negative. So you might, for instance, have a tick, you might have a thumbs up, you might have a thumbs down, a cross, you might have the kind of typical circle with a line through it, which is symbolizing no. There's different icons that you can use, different ways that you can portray those across in your application. I'm excited to see how you started designing your wireframes. I've seen the end result, which is really impressive. Yep, we'll get on to that in about 5 minutes. But yeah, it's I'll go through some little kind of a little demo of how to use the program, which we'll get onto soon. But moving on, let's think about the what other stuff we got on the user interface. We've got a color palette, and this can be anything from keeping your colors on brand, so following the kind of color scheme for your branding, and also not using too many contrasting colors, and using contrasting colors where they are like applicable. For instance, yes and no, and then kind of like positive and negative aspects of your application. For instance, you might use blue and orange, green and red, but it's about using them in balance, and also kind of keeping the user interface and the color scheme to the style that you're going for, whether it's a minimalistic style or a kind of creative, like a childish kind of style. It depends who your target audience is going to be. So after we've thought about our user interface, we need to think about the user experience. And this kind of plays along with the user interface, as the user interface is going to be the elements that are on the screen, and the user experience is about how the user interacts with those elements. So we need to ask ourselves a couple of questions before we even get to the design process of building our application, and that's how do your end users use your app? Now this might be, you might have admins using it in a specific way, you might have users using it in a specific way. Again, it all depends on what you're trying to do with your app, what the purpose of your app is. But you need to think about how your end users are going to use your app and what you need them to have access to. You also need to think about how should they navigate between screens. And this kind of takes a lot of trial and error planning and testing. When you're building out your screens, your kind of different elements, you want to be thinking about different ways that you can get to and from your previous screens to the next screen. Like what is the kind of flow of the process which your users are going to be taking? And finally, you also need to think about what data that they have access to. So with the application that I'm building, which is the Daily Digest rebuild in Microsoft 365 in the Power Apps, I've got multiple sections because I want everything to be done from the app, as much as possible to be done from the app without anyone, even the admins, having to go out to the rest of the Microsoft 365 platform to sort out approvals and SharePoint lists. I want it all to be done within the app if that's possible. So having that kind of the access for admins to do that, whilst also controlling the fact that the normal users won't be able to access certain information such as approvals and certain lists, for example. That's just another thing to think about. The rain is coming down quite hard now. So why should we prototype our applications? Hopefully that's rain's not being picked up. So yeah, why should we prototype our applications? So prototyping is a very quick and easy way of getting the ideas that are in your head, which are usually fantastic ideas, which you can forget a lot of things if you don't do this quickly, because it's hard to explain why. But yeah, it just gets all of your ideas out there in a visual format that you can share with other people. It also allows you to focus on the user experience and the user interface elements. And what I mean by that is, it's happened to me already from my last stream. I ended up spending so much. It's actually hailing and the hail's coming in. If you guys just bear with me 2 seconds, I just need to close the window. Sorry about that. Yeah, I had hail coming through the office window, which isn't ideal with all the electrical equipment we have. And Helen, it will get to you. So, where was we? So, yeah, it allows you to focus on the user experience, the user interface. And as I was saying, I found this out last week, that whilst trying to create the user interface inside Power Apps, I quickly discovered that I ended up kind of messing around too much with the functionality of the elements on my screen, rather than focusing on what I intended to focus on that week, which was the user interface. So yeah, using a tool like a prototyping and wireframing tool is going to allow you to focus purely on the user experience and the user interface without having to worry about any of those like data sources and connecting up different elements of the Microsoft 365 Power Platform. Third, we have it's a shareable format. So with prototyping, it's nice and easy to export. Most of the applications that you can use for prototyping and wireframe have an export to PDF, to JPEG, any sort of image format. And even Adobe XD, which I'm about to share with you, even has a way of sharing a interactable application with your peers as well, and whoever you're going to basically send this off to, if you need somebody else to design it. Another thing, it's going to allow designers as well a nice, easy tool to produce these kind of prototypes in. A designer is not going to use Power Apps to prototype or wireframe a design that they want you to build. And finally, it's easy to adjust styling, and what I mean by that is you don't have to worry too much about putting in expressions in Power Apps, trying to get your width and your height right and everything, because everything in Adobe XD and Balsamiq is drag and drop. It's scalable. It's just a nice, easy flow to work with. So what are your options for prototyping and wireframing? So first, we have Power Apps. I put out a poll a couple of days ago on LinkedIn and over social media to kind of see what people were using. And I think I had about 50 results back, and almost 90% of the results turns out that people are using Power Apps to wireframe and prototype their applications. And as explained previously, it's not ideal because you end up focusing on the functionality of your app rather than the design, and this is the kind of key area that we want to kind of work with. So I mean, it is possible in Power Apps. It's a slower process, but there are other alternatives out there. Pen and paper, that's also a common one. It's something that I would probably do before even getting into the Adobe XD kind of idea, just to really just draw some boxes, draw some shapes, figure out how you kind of want the app to look that way. So the two options that we have, one of them which I'm going to go into today, but the two options is Balsamiq and Adobe XD, and these are specifically designed for wireframing and prototyping applications, and this can be done for prototyping and wireframing web pages, mobile applications, tablet applications, anything that you kind of want to design on a computer screen, you can do in these applications. Balsamiq, I think, has a payable license. It has a 30-day trial, but it's payable. I think it's $89 for one user, which is a bit pricey. I mean, it depends kind of how often you're going to be using it. It kind of distinguishes whether it's worth the price. Adobe XD also comes under the Creative Cloud license. So if you're familiar with Premiere Pro, Photoshop, if you have those design editing tools, then this will be included in that license. I believe there also is a free version available as well on the Adobe website. But Adobe XD is going to be what we are going to be looking at today, what we're going to be working with. So why are we using Adobe XD? So the main reason is it is incredibly fast to wireframe. It's literally a case of you can drag and drop elements into your screen. move them around, connect them up to different screens in such a fast way without having any of these kind of navigate expressions which we've looked at previously. It also has a concept of reusable libraries, and what I mean by this is that there are third-party plugins on Adobe XD which you can download. They're free to use, and these can be anything from icon packs to images to placeholder images to text and fonts and kind of different wireframing elements that you can just drag and drop in and then customize how you want. And these can be used in what we call components, same way Power Apps works, but in a much faster way, where you can create components and then just kind of drag and drop them, copy and paste them, duplicate them onto different screens as you see fit. Which also covers the third-party content and plugins, which I've just covered. As said previously, Adobe XD is going to allow us to focus more on the styling and less on the functionality, keeping things kind of moving forward with our design and not kind of losing track, going off-site on what we're doing. Again, as said previously, a designer will never use Power Apps. A designer, when they want something designed, they're going to come to you, not with a Power App, and go, can you create the functionality for this? I mean, that's very unlikely. They're going to come at you with some form of imagery, whether it's an Adobe illustration, Adobe XD project, something which is going to be easily kind of accessible to you for you to go ahead and work with in Power Apps. Finally, SharePoint has, not SharePoint, Adobe XD, shall I say, has the ability to share your content. And you're probably thinking everything else that you use, Power Apps, has the ability to share. Yes, it does, but not in the fashion that Adobe XD does. You can share your applications and your wireframes in Adobe XD in an interactable way, literally with a single link, and that opens up in any browser. You can share this with other users who have the Adobe XD app on your phone, which is also free. You just need to log in with your Adobe account, and you can kind of go ahead and work with these wireframes as they are kind of used and developed in Adobe XD as well. So this is a quick look at what we're going to be looking at. So it's just an image of the Adobe XD wireframe that we built. I'm not sure where the black boxes have come from. They are kind of grey. I'm not sure where they've exported like that. Maybe it's because it's an image. I think it's something to do with the opacity on the background as well. But when you think about what things we want to consider with our app, now I've kind of broken this down into different kind of sections, which we're going to explore when we dive into Adobe XD. The first thing is reusable components, and this can be a bunch of various things. This can be anything from headers to footers and sidebars, and these are elements that are going to appear on your screens that you may have over multiple screens that carry the same functionality. We can quickly prototype and wireframe these in Adobe XD and save them as components, which we'll get to in just a second. We also need to think about screen space, where we want things to appear on our screen, what sort of information do we want to share on our screen. You don't want to have headers that are too big and just kind of using up valuable kind of screen space. You got to make use of negative space as well, and layered components. So another way of kind of decluttering is having screens that have layered components. And what I mean by that is you might have a single screen, which, like we have here, displays a list of articles, and then having a sidebar which overlays over the top of it. And then you might have a third kind of small window which overlays on top of that, which could be like a menu for the items in your sidebar. And it's about layering them up so they don't all appear on one screen and looking cluttered. Next thing we need to think about is the icons, and this is something that I'm still getting used to, and I've kind of looked at a bunch of other applications on my phone that I have, such as my email app, other news site apps, to kind of see how things are done And one thing that I did notice, everybody is familiar with the kind of like recognizable icons that you have in applications, which means you don't need to always assign them like a text value as well, like above them or below them or beside them. For instance, we have our notifications icon in the top right there. We have a refresh icon and a search icon. Everybody knows what they mean because they appear on 9 out of 10 applications that we already have on our phone. Same with the hamburger menu. We don't need to put text there saying menu. We can use icons to kind of portray what we want to display. And it's also about the icon positioning. There's quite a lot of things to cover here. The main thing is that your icons are kind of free from other icons as best you can. I mean, I know I have 3 at the top right, but you've got to bear in mind that this is a mobile application, and where your fingers and your thumbs are touching, you kind of want to create that user experience where they're not accidentally clicking the wrong things. So you want to kind of space things out and making sure that your icons and your clickable buttons are positioned in a way where they're not going to kind of overlap with other elements of your design. So these are 2 sidebars which I created. Again, we're going to go into XD and have a look at this properly and see kind of how these work, how Adobe XD allows you to connect all of this up. But let's just continue with other things to consider. So you need to think about fonts. I mean, I'm using Lato, which is the kind of font that we use for quite a lot of the Cloud 365 and 365 as elements. I mean, I might decide to change it, but it's about using the correct font sizes, the correct boldness. It's just thinking about those type of things and making sure things look right. And I'd recommend to kind of refer into other apps to kind of get that scaling right, because a lot of big apps that are really popular, they've already gone through this process and they've kind of seen what works and what doesn't work. So finally, we're going to talk about the look and feel. As I've just mentioned, you want to use tried and tested designs. So like right now, even just pick up your phone, go have a look through, I don't know, your email app, the Outlook app, the your favorite news site app, YouTube, social media, for example. They're all going to have similar but unique elements of the design, which there's no harm in copying. I mean, it's probably the best way to get something that looks comfortable, and I did that pretty much here with my sidebars. Also, don't kind of stray away from exploring new ideas, new unique ideas that you have in your head. If you think something might work, then give it a try. Like I said, Adobe XD and prototyping, any wireframing app is going to allow you to do this like very fast. So there's not going to be, I think if you was to do this in Power Apps, you'd kind of have an idea in your head and then you'd go, oh, I've already got it working. Don't want the hassle of recreating this to see if my new idea works. Just jump into Adobe XD or a wireframing app, prototyping app, and just explore, because it's the only way that you're going to see whether your ideas work. I mean, this is probably, these sidebars are about the 3rd iteration that I had, and I've kind of come to some sort of conclusion as to how I want them. I mean, they probably still need a little bit of adjustment, but yeah, we'll take a look at those shortly. Last but not least, you make sure that you test your application over and over again when you're wireframing, because especially when it comes to connecting up screens, being able to navigate between your app, you want to be able to make sure that all of the elements work correctly, they point to the right places, you're able to get back to certain areas. I think that one of the key things that I had was having that form that we created in the 2nd episode of this these live streams, where eventually you can submit an article, and then originally I had just an OK button. It took me back to the main screen, and then I was thinking, what about if you needed to add more articles, then you'd need an extra button there. So I ended up putting another button on that page to save having to go through 4 other menus just to get back to that screen. So it's all about kind of thinking and using your app. Using your app is the best way to kind of see whether things are performing how you want them to perform. So that's enough of the theory and enough of my presentation. We're going to have a look at Adobe XD, and we're going to see, we're going to probably create some basic screens. I'm going to show you the design that I've done and show you what kind of end solution that you can get to. So let me just close this. Does anyone have any questions about anything we've just gone through? Any other tips, recommendations that you could add to that? Okay, so this is Adobe XD, and this is the project that I currently am working on and have been working on all week. And it looks fairly, I'm going to say it looks basic. There's not many screens, but it's how those screens interact with each other, which is important. So I'm going to show you basically how everything kind of connects together. So first, before we even get into anything Adobe XD, I'm just going to show you how this application actually functions. So if I was to hand this to you right now, you guys would probably think that this is a kind of a fully developed and shipped application. It works almost in that sort of way. So as we discovered last week, that we kind of had this top header menu, which I basically recreated. And this basically allows us to create, what I've done is basically create some buttons, which allow me to switch between some screens, shows me the recent posts, my news, which is a bunch of categories that you follow, and the popular articles that are trending right now. So I've created this sort of gallery. It's very similar to Power Apps in terms of how it works, which basically has kind of a placeholder for some images, your title, the category. We have the opportunity to favorite certain articles, and we get a little pop-up says added to favorites. And it's all about just kind of creating that user interface, that experience, to kind of see how things react. So with Adobe XD, we're able to navigate between screens. We're able to bring up little pop-up menus. For instance, we created a notifications panel. I mean, I'm not sure how Power Apps is going to deal with any of this and how much of this is possible, but it's all about having the ideas down, and then you can kind of work forward from there. So we have like a notifications panel, and again, all these arrows have been kind of designed in XD to be able to navigate to different screens. We also have a search bar to search for articles. Again, it has no functionality. It's only for aesthetics and making sure that things appear how we want them to. Obviously, the refresh button doesn't do anything because there's no data source. It's all about the user experience, user interface. So here we have a side panel on our left, which again is just an overlay. It doesn't go to a separate screen, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. And obviously with the application that I was talking about, I've got the opportunity to go to a user center or the admin center. This button won't obviously be here on the main design. It's just for a way for me to kind of navigate between the screens and see how things are going to look. So I can see as well that I've added these kind of menu system on the left hand side, which is going to take me to other screens. Again, it's all completely configured to take me to the relevant screen. Approvals will take me to approvals. Favorites will take me to my favorite screen. What do we have? We have my submissions. And again, this isn't actually anything to do with real approval process. It's just how I wanted it to look. So I know when it comes to building this in Power Apps, I've kind of got a reference and something that I kind of want to go to. We've got the opportunity to add new articles. You can add forms in Adobe XD. Again, they don't do anything. It's just purely for that user interface. You can kind of see what our success screen is going to be like. This is the button that I was talking about before. I just had a success screen and it didn't actually go anywhere, apart from being able to go back to your submissions, which would be nice, which is why I've added this add more, which brings back the opportunity to add an article. It's just thinking about that whole user experience and user design. But this is about 80% there of how I would like this application to eventually look. I mean, I've kind of prototyped the whole approvals process. I can see that I want to approve or reject this article. We get a little notification this article has been approved. It goes to the approved screen. We can unapprove things. But yeah, I'll show you how everything connects up. So in Adobe XD, let's take a look at the user interface of Adobe XD, which actually makes me wonder how they came up with the user interface for Adobe XD before Adobe XD was actually created. But yeah, they've obviously thought about everything that you need fundamentally to start wireframing your applications. So up on the left-hand side, top left, obviously we've got our normal kind of toolbar file to help, which contain basically everything that I'm about to show you on this left-hand side menu. So at the top we have three key menus, apart from Home obviously, which will bring up the Creative Cloud. But we have Design, Prototype and Share. And these are what I would consider to be the three key steps to prototyping and wireframing your application. You don't need anything else. You don't need any functionality. These are literally the only things that we need. So the Design tab is going to allow you to change and work with any of the actual design elements of each of your screens, whether it's going to be text, icons, pictures, images, which is the same as pictures. I don't know why I said that. But any of the kind of visual elements such as shapes that you can basically add, drag and drop and move around with your prototype. If we look down the left-hand side menu, we've got our typical tools. So I'm just going to use my kind of template which I created to just demonstrate this. So obviously we have our select tool, and this is just going to allow you to select various elements that are on our artboards. These are all called artboards, by the way. And when you select these, it's going to open up the different components in a hierarchical form, so you can kind of see where the layers kind of sit on top of each other. And you can, I should really be renaming these, so it's easy to find, because I have about 1 million layer 2s, and I should probably rename these, which I will get to at some point. I was just having so much fun kind of building this out that I didn't really think about the organization of it. So that's one thing to kind of bear in mind. Another thing that we have is we have the ability to add shapes. We can add squares and circles and triangles and lines. But when you add one of these, if we got text as well, we can add text. When you add one of these to your artboard, you get a little properties panel on the right hand side. It's not very extensive, but it's enough to get the basic fundamental ideas of your wireframe in. I mean, you can also add custom images if you wanted to as well. Anything that you've created in Photoshop or Illustrator, you can add those straight into here. Any Adobe products, all of their kind of default project file extensions are interchangeable between applications, which is spot on from Adobe. So yeah, on the right hand side we have standard kind of what I call graphical interface stuff, which is where we can adjust our width. 500 pixels, maybe not 5,000, 50,000. That's quite a lot. 500 pixels. You can make it by 100 pixels height. You can change the positioning of it with the X and Y values here, or you can just drag and drop. You can change the rotation. Just the kind of standard tools that you've got. One thing to note as well is with all Adobe products, anything with a graphical interface, they all have these kind of alignment tools, which are really handy. So we can center things on the screen, making sure they're centered. We can assign them to like the left-hand side line, and they'll kind of be indicated with blue and purple lines, which is really, really handy. And that, again, this is all part of that kind of quick process that allows you to quickly get your ideas down without worrying too much about even the positioning of items, because Adobe XD will do all of that for you. And what I mean by this is if we duplicate this, what it'll do is it'll even kind of fix all of your spacing for you. So it'll snap to the correct spacing, so we can see that's 45 pixels gap between each of these rectangles, which is ideal. What other stuff can we do? This responsive resize, again, I've not really worked too much with responsive designs yet, but what this basically means is that any kind of aspect ratio changes that you make to your application, whether you are making it more narrow, more extended, you can make certain elements of your design react accordingly, and this is really easy to do using these this properties panel on the right. You've got simple tools like opacity, so we can choose whether it's visible, half visible, etc. Blend modes, this is getting more into how, I mean, I've worked with Adobe After Effects and Premiere Pro, and basically this is how, say for example you had two overlapping images, this is how you can kind of blend those together, and there's a bunch of different kind of built-in options available to you. It's not as extensive as other Adobe products, but enough to kind of get you started. This kind of works really well with images, and say for example you had images and text and you wanted the text to blend in with the images in a nice way, you can use some of them blend mode features there. Moving on down, we've got standard fill and border stuff, so we can change kind of, if we don't want the border on here, obviously the box goes invisible, we can change the background color, we can choose our red here that we've chosen, and we can also change the opacity of this specific fill or border. Just a neat little tool that we've got. One cool thing that you've got as well is color palettes in Adobe XD. So once you have chosen a color or set a color, you can click on this little plus icon here, and this will add it to a color palette. I know that I'm in the way just there, so let me just get rid of myself. And this will add it to a color palette. So say for example, I mean I haven't got a blue on here, let's go for a blue. Say we like the idea of this kind of like teamsy looking purple. Once we've set it, we can click on the plus icon, and that will save, and we can just, and then what we can do is we can come and reuse this anywhere else. So we can just come and click on the fill, and we've got that. We can change the maybe the color of the whole background if we wanted to. There's just a little neat feature which we can do. So that explores some of the kind of design properties that you have access to. One thing I missed up to the top here is the alignment. So we can align this to the center of our screen, to the right of our screen, and you can kind of select multiple sections of these and center them along each other as well if you wanted to that way. I'm just going to remove that for now, and I'm going to show you one quick thing which I've used various times in Adobe XD, and that is the ability to grid out certain elements of your design. What do I mean by this? This is basically how I created the gallery. There's a nice easy way to basically create multiple instances of the same thing in a horizontal or vertical format. And what I mean by this, let's have a look. If I create a rectangle here, imagine I'm just doing a quick gallery, and I'll just put in a bit of text that says gallery item. And then what I can do with these, if I go back to my select tool, is I can select, if I make sure I'm actually pressing shift, I can select both elements of these and hit this repeat grid up at the top right. And it basically shows you in this little animation what it does. And it basically allows you to replicate these as many times as you want. So if I click repeat grid, we get these little kind of grabber handles. And with this, I can drag as many down as I want. And it's just a quick way of prototyping kind of multiple instances of data, of information that you want to share. So say, for example, I made an adjustment to this, it would adjust across all of them. If I decided that I wanted to change the text, okay, I didn't actually know that it doesn't actually do it along with the text, but you can change that manually as well. But I think it's main just for the design elements. So how do we actually go about creating screens? So over on the left we have this artboard button. If we click on this, we can either click on the screen and it will create a default size for a screen that we want to work with. In this case it's chosen an iPhone 12, which I'm assuming is the resolution right here. You can also drag and drop to maybe create certain kind of little widgets that you want to pop up if you wanted to use something like this. That's an option as well. Or for me, I will simply just click on my template. I find the easiest way to move these around and stuff is using the actual text name for the artboard that you work with, and you can just Control D, and this will just copy that whole section, and we can remove that and begin working on something new. So that's kind of covered most of the design aspects of things. There's another kind of little tip that I wanted to share, and that's using components to create things. So say for example I wanted this component to be reused across multiple screens, which if I scroll down, I am using the gallery component that I created across multiple screens. I haven't created this multiple times. And the way I've done this is once you've gridded up the kind of elements that you want to share, you can right click on these and make component, or use Control K. And this has made a new component, and you can view components over at the bottom left under libraries. We can see it's just called component 12. And then we can just drag and drop these onto other elements of our screen, or other screen should I say. And then I'm assuming with every adjustment you make with this, it will adjust across all of your screens, which is why I've got this template screen in the first place, and that's to allow me to reuse this header. And as I was kind of adding some of these icons, such as the search and the notification icon, they were appearing across all of my other screens. So again, it's the same way that components is used in Power Apps. But yeah, it's a very, very handy little tool. We also go back to our layers view, and we can kind of see all of our screens here. We can go into each of our screens and kind of see what elements make them up. So we have like buttons, we have rectangles, we have our text as well. And then finally, on the design aspect, now this is what I was talking about earlier with reusable libraries. Adobe XD has reusable plugins, and I've added a bunch here. These are the ones that I've kind of been using. But the way you can do this is if you click on this little plus icon here, you'll go to the Discover Plugins window, and there's enough, should I say, plugins which you can use in your app and your wireframe and designs. And there's so many different things that you can kind of go ahead and use here. I mean, you've got insert placeholder text, and this is just going to insert some text that you can use in different boxes, for example. It's just a fast way of let me just close that. It's just a fast way of kind of working with Adobe XD without creating all of the kind of icons yourself. I mean, if you wanted to do that at a later date when you actually start bringing things into Power Apps, that's entirely up to you. But for wireframing, this is more than sufficient for me. But it's literally just a case of you come to the plugin that you want to install, you click install, takes a couple of seconds, and you see it appears, where is it? There we go. This is the plugin that we just installed. It appears here. And then we can go into that, and we can kind of, if I just go back up so I don't mess around with anything I've done, we can select this box, for example. Let me just select the actual box rather than the... I'm sure it's not selecting the box. It might be because I'm in a different mode. But we can just go fill with placeholder text. Just ignore that. And let's see what this plugin allows us to do. So we just got our standard kind of lorem ipsum stuff that we see everywhere on web pages, building stuff and all that. So yeah, we can just click insert text, and this is just going to insert and kind of populate that box that we filled. And as you can see, it's filled across all of them. Obviously, we wouldn't want to do something like this. We'd kind of maybe use this for our boxes, for our images, for example. But a great way that I've used this and utilized this was a really great plugin which I found, which was Denali Icons. And this is basically a plugin that has a huge library of common kind of mobile web icons that you're going to see everywhere that are usable. They're literally just drag and drop straight into your application. I've noticed that sometimes it crashes, so I'm not going to drag one in at the moment. But you've got things like arrows, so you can go to your next screens, your back screens. You've got bell icons for notifications. There's so many here. I mean, this has played a massive part in my application, the controller navigation section, where we've got plus icons, we've got tick icons for approvals, you've got your little hamburger menu, which everyone's familiar with. And this is what I was talking about. It's kind of using the correct icons to kind of portray what you want to display on your screen. I mean, obviously my hamburger menu brings up a sidebar, which is why I've used the hamburger menu. If it kind of brought up maybe a grid menu, I would have probably gone for something more like this, or maybe like this one. But yeah, you get the idea of what the kind of possibilities are. But there is literally hundreds of usable icons in here, even third-party kind of social icons and stuff that you'll see, like Twitter and Facebook sharing icons. All really handy stuff. But yeah, that's why Adobe XD is like really handy. All of this stuff, all of these plugins are built into Adobe XD. You don't have to go scouring the internet trying to find icons and images and text and placeholder images, and it just makes your whole process, your design process, a lot easier. So, with our design stuff kind of now talked about, we've looked at those key areas. Let's kind of look at how we can prototype and wireframe, more specifically navigation, pop-ups, and how we get to these different elements. Again, with everything in Adobe XD, it's all drag and drop, which is really simple. So if I go to this prototype tab at the top, we've got everything kind of closed at the moment, which is ideal. You'll see that our properties panel on the right hand side changes. And this is where we can now create our interactions and our actions. So how do we want our users to interact with our application, and how do we want the app to actually respond? So at the moment everything's grayed out, and that's because nothing is currently selected. So if I was to say, for example, let's scroll out and have a look at our application. Let's say, for example, we wanted to take a look at our hamburger menu. So you can see, as I've just selected the header for this, it's selected the whole header, including everything inside the header. And that's because the header is a separate component. By the way, guys, if you have any questions or you're finding it hard to follow along, or is it anything kind of specific that you'd like me to show, just just drop a message in the chat and I'll try and help as well. But anyway, let's get back to it. So yeah, we have our element selected, which was our header. And if we double click again, we can go into the kind of different lower and kind of child elements of this component. For instance, our hamburger menu. I'm just going to delete that. I'm not sure why that just got created. So we can see that our hamburger menu has this kind of dotted line to it. And the best way to kind of explain what the difference is here, so we've got these dotted lines and we've also got these solid lines as well. They might be a bit hard to see over the black. So a dotted line kind of symbolizes a overlay, so not a screen change, but adding an extra layer to your screen. So for instance, a pop-up, or in this case a sidebar, and a solid line would indicate actually kind of transition into a different screen. So we can quickly create different kind of navigational elements just by having multiple screens. So what we can do is, say for example we selected, I don't want that, let's go here. It's a little bit hard to see. Say for example I wanted to have, when I click on these numbers here, I want this to open up, let's say it goes to our, submission screen. So if I just zoom out a little bit, we can see that every element on our screen, every design element that we've created will have a little arrow off the side of it, surrounded by a blue box, so you know exactly what item is selected and what's going to be triggerable to use. So we can click on these little, or click and drag on these arrows, and you'll see this blue line comes off, and this is going to allow us to snap to another target screen, which essentially, when we click on it, will send us to that screen. And by default, nothing is selected, so we're going to make this go to our submission screen. And you can see it's auto snapped, and on the right here, what's happened is our destination has now gone to our My Submission screen. And the animation that it's going to do is a dissolve, which is basically like a little fade, which I can show you if I just make sure this one is selected. If I select this little text box now, it just does a little fade to our second screen. And you can change that by selecting either on the line or back on the element. And you've got all of these other kind of typical animations that you see on apps, such as slide in and push. Slide in basically will slide over the top, so that's how it would appear, and push would basically push the previous window out of the way and replace it with the new one. So let's just make this a nice slide down from the top. So when we click on this now, if I just go and test this, when I click on this now, we get a nice little slide from the top that replaces our window. So say for example, instead of sending us to a, or just quickly before I do jump on, we've got, if we click back on the line, we've got easing, and there's another Adobe feature which I see on all of their kind of video animation editing applications, and that's got the use of Easy Ease, which basically kind of, instead of making your animation linear, so going from 0 to 100%, you've got ease in, ease out, or ease in and ease in, ease out, and ease in out, which are the kind of nicer ways of creating animations. And what they do is they basically just smooth off the tail or the start of the animation, so it kind of goes fast and then kind of goes slow and tails off slowly towards it getting to that kind of 100% point of the animation. So yeah, that's just something to, I mean, ease in, ease out is something that I'd advise using in this, and you can set the duration of that ease as well. You've also got preserve scroll position, which basically means if you scroll on the screen, that element will stay on the screen, which is ideal for headers, for example. You don't want them to scroll with your application or maybe you do. It's entirely your choice. So let's just move on to the other types of actions. So we've got transition. We also have overlay here. I'm not going to go into depth into all of these because I've not really used them enough to kind of warrant them having a description in this video. But what I have used is overlays, and this is like a really nice little feature. So I'm just going to delete this line that we created, and instead I'm going to bring this line to one of our little pop-ups that we have, and we're just going to bring it to the added to favorites. If I scroll in here, you can see. So now that we have, now you see we've got this line that goes added to favorites. Now at the moment, this is still set to transition, which means that we're going to get this really ugly kind of as if there's nothing else in the background, which of course there isn't, because it's just transitioning to the screen, which is not what we want. So this is where, if I go back to this line here, we can select overlay, and what you'll see is you'll get this kind of little kind of green wireframe in the background. This is basically a invisible representation of the new screen that you want to overlay. So this can be placed anywhere on your new screen. I can place this at the bottom, or I can place this at the top. Let's just place it at the top for now. You can see this is turned into an overlay, so this is now a dotted line. And again, you've got a few different things. We want it to slide down. It makes more sense being at the top. So if we press play now, and you'll see that we've got this little added to favorites, which pops up at the top. And obviously you can make this OK button do other things. You can add more buttons. It's entirely how you want to wireframe your designs. But once you get to grips with the kind of the design tab, the prototype tab, all of your designs are going to be like very quick. You're going to be able to, I put this together. I learned Adobe XD and put this together in about 2.5 days. If I was to recreate this now with the knowledge of Adobe XD, which I have, it'd probably take me about a quarter of the time. But yeah, it's a very easy application to get a grasp on. So that kind of covers the prototyping aspect. Now it's up to you how you kind of use it. I've created, if I just show you this kind of project as a whole, I have created multiple screens. I've got my recent screen, my news screen, my popular screen, that all allow you to do different things. And they're basically just using components to replicate data which I created once, and then basically add these to the different screens. So the final tab that I want to share with you is the actual share tab. Now, I was experimenting with this earlier on today, and this is possibly the number one reason why you would want to use Adobe XD over many other wireframing apps and even Power Apps itself. And that's the ability that you can actually send interactable versions of your wireframe with practically anybody. Just got a comment. Seems a really great way of creating a visualization of the whole planned solution without having to code to create it for real. Yes, 100%. I can't stress enough what I said at the beginning, that using this tool to kind of bring everything in how I want it, it just saves a ton of time. Even the fact that I've had to learn Adobe XD, it saved a ton of time over kind of doing this in Power Apps, because with Power Apps you've got to use expressions to navigate between different screens. It can become a little bit kind of like fumbly to move elements around, whereas once you've got this idea, you know there's kind of width and heights of things that you want, you can just go ahead straight into Power Apps and recreate that. But moving back onto the main reason why we're using Power XD, and that's the ability to share your applications with other people. And Adobe XD offers, I think, 5 really interesting ways to do this. If you go to the Share tab, on the right hand side you've got View Setting. Now if you click this, you get a little pop-up message, pop-up drop down, should I say. And this is how 5 different ways that you can share your application with other people. And it really depends on who you want to send it to and how they're going to be using your prototype. You can do a design review, which basically sends out your current design in an interactable way with the option for whoever's on the receiving end to leave comments, feedback, and they can also make notes against certain elements of your design. You've got the development tab, which is going to allow people to also work with the project and maybe change some of the features. And I think there's also some sort of embedding features as well in there as well. You've also got presentation, which is just a quick, easy way to share in a browser format. You've got user testing, which I think if you open that on a mobile device, it opens up on the Adobe XD app. And then you've got custom, which I've not actually exported. So if I just click presentation, and then I can do anybody with this link. I'm just going to update the link just to make sure all of my changes are saved, because that previous link was before I'd kind of finished this prototype. If you give that a second, you get a link here. And what we can do is we can copy that. And we can bring that into our browser. And this will open up a fully functional application, which anybody can kind of come in and use. I mean, it's probably the most simplest way to share a design with somebody, and it works exactly how it would if you was testing the app as well. So all of your functions work as they should do as well, which is perfect. So again, I can go to my approvals. I can see that that article was rejected. This one's been approved. We can see that's been approved. I don't want to approve that anymore. This article has been unapproved. Just simple things like that. We can just go ahead and test that. So I hope that covers a. That's an interesting feature. I didn't even notice that. But yeah, hopefully that covers Adobe XD as a product. Hopefully you guys can make use of Adobe XD. Hopefully I've given you some pointers as to why you should be using it, why you shouldn't be using Power Apps to prototype your applications. Hopefully I've given you a little bit into the theory behind things you need to consider with your applications. But I think the next step for me is going to be bringing this into Power Apps. I know that I'm going to be speaking to someone a bit more in the know about whether a lot of the stuff that I've built here is actually viable options in Power Apps. Obviously, Power Apps is very limited in terms of the kind of beauty of the UI that you can create in Adobe XD. But hopefully I'll be looking into making sure that this app is actually going to be viable and actually be able to be made in Power Apps. So that's going to conclude today's Friday live stream. Obviously, as I say, every stream, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon. You'll get notified every time that we go live on this channel, which is 3 p.m. And I will see you next week. I hope you guys enjoyed.